Hello everybody, this is Danny from Deep South Homestead on Porch Time this morning. Yeah guys, I know I'm not on the porch. We just have too much noise going on outside for me to be able to do porch time outside. Y'all know there's the ongoing saga with the aggravating neighbors. They're just hell-bent on making everybody's life miserable, and the dogs are going crazy all the time now, and so I'm just not going to ruin my video with aggravating dogs barking in the background. Now, we're not talking about a dog, we're talking about a pack of dogs, okay? So instead, I've decided to come into the studio room this morning to do porch time so that we can just share our time and not have to be interrupted with lots of loud noises. And I'm not going to say that you're not going to still hear a noise in this video because it's loud enough you can hear it in my house. So, but anyway, porch time is extremely important to me. As many of y'all said, it's important to y'all, and I want to be able to make sure that it lives up to that expectation. And one of the things that I've promised y'all is that I'm not going to do away with porch time. I'm going to keep doing porch time as long as I'm physically able to do it and that YouTube will permit me to do it. Now, I am doing some talks over on Patreon. That's very more in depth than what I'm doing here. Not because I'm trying to slight anybody on YouTube, but YouTube has put so many boundaries on me now that we're having to be so particular about what we do because of politically correct words nowadays. People can't just live. They have to have specific words used in specific ways, and we're having lots of our videos are being demonetized now. Even our live streams are being demonetized because of certain words that we use. The one we did this past Saturday night when we talked about prepping, they demonetized it before it ever got on the air. We lost all the views of that. So if you want to help Deep South out, go back and watch that again, or just turn it on and let it play in the background like a radio or something like that. Just let it play. That would help us to get the views back on that because they took them away. And I really considered that night of pulling it down and putting it over on Patreon. But I think that I'm going to leave it over on YouTube if they will grant us our reviews back. Now, we've lost all of our views that night, you might say. But hopefully they will reconsider and I won't have to pull it down and put it over on Patreon. But that's how particular it's gotten. Everybody said that was one of our best live streams we've done. And it went almost 2 hours. And I didn't plan on that. It's just that people got so into what we were doing that I wanted to keep it going to bless the people on the live stream. And it was a blessing to us to be able to interact with you all as our viewers. But YouTube had other thoughts on that, and they demonetized it before we ever got it on the air. So help us work on that, guys. You know, go back and rewatch it to get the views back up on it so that we can, maybe we can leave it if they decide to monetize it. Now, when you see an ad, let me say this, when you see an ad in front of it, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's been monetized because YouTube will still put ads in front of it and they get the revenue even though they don't monetize it for us. So just to let you know. Anyway, enough of that. Today on Porch Time, they cannot steal your knowledge. Okay, that's a thought I want you to keep in your head. We talked about prepping the other night. We talked about survival. We talked about an LCE, life-changing events. We talked about SHTFs. I don't like using that word. That's the reason I've gone to LCEs now. We talk about on Patreon. We'll be talking about EMPs. We're going to talk about food security on Patreon and stuff like that. We got like 5 videos I think coming up on food security on Patreon. We have all these things coming up out here, guys, and they all deal with knowledge. Now, the knowledge that you store up in your head, okay, is the one thing that unless you end up with some sort of dementia or Alzheimer's or something like that, they can't take that from you. They may take your books, they may take your internet system, they may take your whatever, your downloads, your ebooks. They may confiscate all this stuff and just do away with it. They may monitor the internet. They may do all these type of things. They may do like they did back in the early years where they had book burnings. This is a part of history that nobody ever talks about anymore, is that they had book burnings. And basically, they would be a train of thought go through the community or the nation, you know, that we don't want the civilization going in this direction, so let's confiscate all books that have to do with this particular subject, like herbs. I mean, back in the day, early years, herbs are considered witchcraft, and so they had book burnings, and they martyred the witches, they called them, and they were nothing more than probably herbalists, a lot of them. Now there were witches, don't get me wrong, there were those out there, but most of the time it was people just practicing herbs, you know, and they were just going around burning at the stake and all this kind of stuff. And guys, there's nothing to say that can't happen again. So that's why we always tell y'all on Deep South Homestead, get hardback books. Don't depend on what you're looking at me in here on this YouTube thing. You can download this Porch Time and put it into a folder somewhere and put it on a thumb drive. You can do whatever you want to do, and say I've got that for a later time, for later viewing. But guys, if an EMP happens or something like that, you're going to lose that. You know, it may not burn it up on a thumb drive, but if you don't have a device to watch it on, it's useless to you. Or if they go in and they start monitoring the live streams, or if they monitor the videos, like, well, they're beginning to do it now. We're seeing it heavily as a creator. It's so hard for me to explain. So much is going on behind the scenes that we find out about. And I'm telling y'all, knowledge. Store up knowledge. Write it down on something and remember it. Because memory, train your memory to hold things to its ultimate capacity in your head. Don't have to be outside doing something and just walk up and say, oh, I need to go get the book and see what this says. No, you need to have it as knowledge in your head. If you had to bug out and you didn't have any literature to take with you, you need to be able to know these things and keep them in your head. It's just like me when I was building houses. I mean, if I walked up to a 1,200 square foot house and people go, well, we're going to be building a 1,200 square foot house, you know, 8-12 pitch, and it's a standard house, you know, just rectangle shaped house or whatever. You know, I could look at them and say, well, it's going to take X number of studs to build this. And they go, well, how do you know? You haven't looked at the print yet. Well, I don't have to look at the print because it's a 1,200 square foot house. I've built so many of them till you automatically know it's going to take, 400 studs. I mean, you automatically know that. You know, whether they're 8-foot ceilings, 9-foot ceilings, 10-foot ceilings, or whatever. You automatically know that. You automatically know you're going to have so many bundles of 16. You have so many bundles of 16-foot 2x4, 16-foot. So many 16-foot rafters. I mean, ceiling joists and beams and stuff like that. That stuff automatically comes into your head because it's known knowledge. It's stuff that you do it every day. You know it, and you don't have to go sit down. And you still do the blueprint run out, but in the long run, you have an idea up front about what a home like that's going to cost somebody. So you can give them a ballpark figure if they're just looking for a ballpark figure. Now, surviving is basically the same way. Living off the land is basically the same way. If you're foraging, you need to be able to right now in your area where you live, because it'll only work where you live. You can't do foraging tips where you live and come here and expect them to work. It's not going to work because we have a total different plant system here than what you have where you're at. Most of our plants are not even in the books. There's a variation of these plants in the books. When we go to look up plantains and different things like that, wild lettuces and things like that we're looking for medicinal reasons and stuff like that, and we get our leaves and stuff like that, they don't even match what's in the computer system. And when we go and talk to the extension people, or you talk to the people that are the people who tell you about all the different plants and stuff like that, they will tell you, well, there's about 45 different varieties in our area of those particular things, like plantain. There's several different plantains here where we live at. There's different wild lettuces. The leaves look completely different on them. Guys, the milk thistles look different. All kinds of things look different here than they do in the books. That's why you need to have a working knowledge of stuff that you can forage on in your head. Not necessarily having to grab a book and go look and see if this is something that you need to try to identify. Now is the time to identify it. Not after an LCE happens, but now is the time. Gain the knowledge now. Go around through the woods where you live at. Learn the kinds of trees that grow in your areas. I've talked to one of my subscribers, Adrian. I don't think he would mind me telling this. I mean, he's into law enforcement, and as he drove around his town, he would learn where the different pecan trees were out over highways and streets and stuff like that, so that if an event happened, he would know where to go and to get pecans from, or he knows where there's fruit trees growing out in the wild and stuff like that, because he sees them patrolling all the time. Guys, this is what you do. You learn what trees are in your area and what the uses are for them. You learn to identify those trees whenever you are out in the woods. You don't have to look and go, well, is this a red oak? Is this a water oak? Is this a pin oak? Is this a willow oak? Is this a black oak? Is this a blackjack oak? Is this a live oak? You don't have to stop and ask yourself, is this a sawtooth oak? Is this a swamp chestnut oak? Is this a chestnut oak? Is this a hill black gum? Is this a swamp black gum? Is this a red gum? Is this a tupelo gum? You don't have to sit and wonder about these trees, because each one has a specific use, and it's native to that area for a specific reason. God put specific cultivars of trees in specific reasons, because they're used to survive in the climate and the situation that you'll be in that region. Those trees all have value for that area and its climate. And those are things you need to have in your head. If you're out on a creek bank and you're going, and an LCE's happened, there's no electricity, there's nothing like this going on, and you're looking for food, and you go, there's fish in that water out there, I know there is. And you're going, now, how am I going to get those fish out of that water? And you go back to the house and you go, well, I don't have any fish hooks or anything like that. Well, the first thing you want to do is you can go in there and get you a paper clip and make you a little tiny hook out of it. Make it real small, because to make it too big, it's too limber. Make it kind of small. Go to your shop, take a file, and kind of file the little point off where it hooks into them at. Take your pair of needle nose pliers and make you little eyelets on it. Get you some threads of different types. I mean, if you don't have fishing line, that's one thing you need to stock up on, is fishing line. We have spools of it out here, but you can use different types of nylon line. I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be a tiny line that's not visible, but you can tie a string onto it, and you can go and go to the creek bank, and you can dig into the edge of creek banks and get them old big wigglers out under the leaves, because they lay about 1 to 2 inches under the leaves in a creek swamp, and get you some big wigglers and put on it, and you go, but I need a cork. Well, that's where identification of trees is going to come in handy, because the roots of a tupelo gum tree are like balsam wood. They just float, and you can go along creek banks where tupelo gums are at, and you can actually take and break them out of the ground, and they're so light you can take a pocket knife if it's good and sharp, and you can whittle them off and make you a little cork and throw it out there. Get you a long stick, a piece of bamboo that grows in the woods. Most everywhere in the South you can find bamboos growing somewhere. Nothing else in people's yards, and they'd be more than happy for you to get them out of the yard, because they are very evasive. Get you a cane pole and tie you a string onto the end of it, and make you cork out of that tupelo gum tree, and you know what? You're in business. You can teach a man how to fish. You can feed him for a lifetime. You give him a fish, the old saying goes, he just eats for a day. But guys, there's thousands and thousands of ways to have the knowledge to get out there and actually do something if an LCE happens. And it's not, and I keep using the word if an LCE happens. Guys, it's not if an LCE happens, it's when it happens. It's going to happen. I don't care where you live, whether it's a hurricane that knocks the power out for weeks on end. I mean, I've been here over a month before without power at my house, and we survived just fine. You know, I mean, we did fine. We have I have big tractor rims that have grating welded in them to build fires in and put a top over it and just cook. I can pressure can on it. I can cook on it. We can water bath on it. I have a barrel system set up for cooking cane syrup. I can also use that to water bath in my canned stuff. You know, guys, there's so many ways to survive that people literally freak out when they think about not having electricity. You know, that you got to realize 90% of civilization has never had electricity up until the late 1800s, early 1900s. I mean, people existed for centuries, millennials, with no electricity. And it's very doable. It's just that we are so comfortable today with being able to flip a switch on, like me flip the light on here to get the lighting in here where I thought it was halfway decent, you know, putting the filters up and stuff like that to keep the lighting off of me. And guys, the knowledge. That's where our forefathers had an advantage over us. They were born and trained and bred knowledge into their heads. As children, from the time they were born, they were taught how to survive, because if they did not, they perished. And even with knowing a lot of times, a lot of them still perished, because with life, there are no guarantees. If an EMP happened and sent us back into, we call it the Dark Ages, or people nowadays call the Dark Ages the 1800s. But you know, the life without electricity, the homes that we build today, I'll say this, the majority of the homes that I've built are not designed to function without electricity. Without electricity in these homes, they become toxic. Okay? They're built so tight up to standards that they actually do not breathe, and that's one reason they're unhealthy, is they don't breathe. But according to codes, we had to build them that way. Now, I did build a lot of chalets, hunting places for wealthy people and stuff like that, that could survive an off-grid situation. And you could live in them very comfortably. But there again, without the knowledge to be able to do it, it's useless to you. And it's so sad to me. So many kids I see today sitting here with something in front of them, pushing the buttons like this. They're on a phone, they're on an iPad, they're Wii boards, whatever, all this stuff. I mean, they're just spending time with electronics, because it's the age of AI. And if you're not an AI compatible type person, you don't have the knowledge to make it in the coming society. In the new world that's coming, the way that it's looked at is you must have this knowledge in order to survive. And I'm talking about the AI knowledge. But the truth of the matter is, with what's really coming, if you don't have the old survival knowledge, you will cease to exist. We've raised a bunch of people, even my age. There's a lot of them my age that are they're marshmallows. You know, they're snowflakes, they're marshmallows. And I know those are some kind of harsh words, but it's the honest to God truth that we have a soft society. Many of our third world countries right now see death on a daily basis. They struggle for food all the time. They've learned to do without electricity. They have brownout days. I have family in the Philippines right now that talk about brownout days. They have so many days they don't have electricity, so many days they do have electricity, because there's not enough to go around for the country. There's shortages of food, and when there is food, it's not very high in protein, so therefore the people are always malnourished. And guys, there's nothing to say that this cannot happen to us here in America, because we are not too big to fail. Rome said they were too big to fail, but Rome fell. All of your big empires, you know, your Medes, your Persians, All these empires, they all fell because they didn't think they thought they were too big to fail, basically. And then demise set in. And that's where we're at today. We have demise setting in here in our country. And guys, that's why we urge y'all, each and every one, knowledge, 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 knowledge. Get it, get it, get it. And store it in your head. Use it on a daily basis. The old adage, if you don't use it, you lose it, is 100% accurate. Because, I mean, you take me, I was a first chair trumpet player for a band. I can't even blow a trumpet anymore. I couldn't tell you the first key on a trumpet. I played a guitar when I was younger. I can't even I couldn't tell you anything about a guitar now. I took voice lessons as a young guy. I sang in a group. Guys, I don't do any of that anymore. I've lost it all because I don't use it. I've done martial arts when I was younger. My body was extremely limber. I mean, I could do all these types of moves and maneuvers and all that kind of stuff. I can't do anything anymore, mainly because I've been broke all to pieces, but I didn't stay with it. And if you don't stay with something, I spoke Spanish for a while. Now I'm sitting here, I'm like, half the words, I don't even remember them anymore, because if you don't use it, you lose it. It's the same way with survival techniques. When you go out and you start trying to learn how to forage and you start learning the wildlife around you, what wildlife is available, how to catch that wildlife, what is that wildlife's traits, what are the weaknesses of it, what are the strengths of it, what kind of trees do we have, like we talked about, what tree is this, what does it do, what is the bark good for, what is the leaves good for, what's poisonous, what's not poisonous. You know, all these things, if you don't go out on a daily basis and use them, you will lose them when the time comes. I've heard so many people sit back and say, this is probably the number one thing I hear, well, if an LCE happens, I've got tons of seeds stored up, and I am going to start planting, and I'm going to grow me some food. There is probably nothing any further from the truth than that. You will die. You will die. And I'll tell you why. First of all, if you haven't prepared your soil ahead of time, if you haven't built your soil, if you don't have the microbes in your soil, the living organisms in your soil that it needs, and it's not good, rich soil, first of all, it ain't going to happen. Secondly, you don't know that the seeds that you have are viable because you haven't been planting them. You haven't acclimated them to your area. It takes about 3 years to acclimate a seed to your area. Do you have animals? Because if you don't have animals, you're not going to have access to fertilize. Without fertilize, plants are not going to grow. And geoengineering is binding up phosphorus in our soils. If you don't know these things, the aluminum that's coming down from geoengineering is raising the pH in our soil unnaturally. The tops of trees are beginning to die because the pH is raising, and most trees that you see the tops dying are trees that need an acidic soil around 5.5, and the soil is being raised up to somewhere around a 6 or a 6.5, so the trees are dying. And in some areas where they need a sweeter soil, the trees are flourishing, especially your evergreens. So some of your evergreens, like cedars and stuff like that, pines still need an acidic soil. But you guys, that's a myth that I'll plant my seeds and survive. Because if you do plant your seeds, you're looking at a minimum of 90 to 120 days before you get any kind of a return from most of those seeds. And then you have to be able to produce enough to save seed for the next year, plus have some to eat. And if you haven't learned the different canning techniques, then you're sitting there, you haven't stored up lids, you haven't stored up salt for your canning, all this type stuff, guys. If you don't have the jars, if you don't have all this stuff stored up, I don't care what kind of knowledge you have in the world, if you don't have some accessories to go along with it, to be able to implement it, then that knowledge is useless to you. I can tell you, I can sit here and probably tell you how to fly an airplane, but I would not get in one with me. Because I've never flown one. I've flown a simulator before, but I've never flown an airplane, a real airplane, and I don't plan on flying one. Because I don't trust me. I have a lot of knowledge in some of those areas, but I would not get up in the air with me. And that's the way I'm talking about with growing plants. People, they store all this knowledge up about growing plants and growing plants and growing plants. and they don't get out and exercise it, and then when the time comes for them to be able to put it into action, and they plant it, and then all of a sudden a disease hits it, and they go, oh my gosh, what is this? Well, it's powdery mildew. What is that? I don't know how to get rid of it. You know, they don't have any baking soda stored up. They don't have any milk because they don't have any animals to produce milk, to make a solution, to spray on it, to get rid of the powdery mildew. The different viruses hit it. Well, what kind of virus is this? I mean, you know, what do I do? You've got a fusarium wilt going on here, or verticillin wilt going on here. Well, what's the problem? Well, this seed's not viable for this area because the humidity is too high, and you can't plant it here because the humidity causes a virus to get on it. Where if you'd have planted it several years in a row and just dealt with the viruses over years and acclimated the seed, you probably would have come up with a seed that would have grown in your area. So guys, there's tons of knowledge that can be gained, but with knowledge, you've got to be able to put it to foot. You know, going out and putting a tomato plant in a bucket or in the ground and saying, okay, I've done my part, you know, I think I've got it. No. If you don't know how to test your soil without kits, go online and look. There's while you still have the internet, and get it, or get a book that talks about it or something other. I mean, you can go out and you can dig a soil sample up and you can put it in a mason jar, a quart mason jar, and put like a little bit of dishwashing liquid in it, and you can shake it and shake it and shake it for like 4 or 5 minutes, and then just set it and come back the next day, and it tells you how to measure the different layers that shows up in that jar to know how much sand you have, how much clay you have, how much organic matter you have, to help you determine whether you have a heavy soil, a light soil, a sandy loam soil, a sandy soil, whether you need organic matter in your soil. All these things are out there, guys, and you need to get this knowledge and store it up here in your head and have it so that you know when you walk up to a plant in your garden that you've planted and you look at it and you go, oh my gosh, my plant's turning purple. What's wrong with it? If you've never dealt with that, you don't know that it has a phosphorus deficiency. You don't know that, and then the plant gets tall and spindly because the cell structure in it cannot formulate and work like it's supposed to work in order to create strong, stocky, healthy stems and leaves. And your plant just kind of looks spindly, and it makes little spindly fruits on it, and it doesn't really do anything, and the seeds are not viable once you get it. And you go, but I don't understand, I planted the seeds. It's supposed to have grown. And you didn't realize that it wasn't taking up any phosphorus because you didn't have any in the soil to start with, and you don't know how to manufacture it. You don't even know where it comes from. You're screwed because you didn't have the fertilizer. You didn't realize that sheep fertilize, goat fertilize. These different type fertilizers have phosphoruses, they have potassiums, chickens has nitrogens in them. Horses and cow manure, you know, basically it's just a composting thing. I mean, it just is matter. It's more like, you know, that it's putting into the soil. It's very little nutrition goes into the soil, but there's certain fertilizers like sheep and goats and rabbit and chickens and stuff like this and turkeys that actually have beneficial things in it that the soil needs to be a healthy soil. And if you don't have this knowledge up here and you don't have the means to go along with it, then you're screwed. So don't let them steal your knowledge from you. Get your knowledge as quickly as you can, because guys, this is 2019. A lot of stuff is fixing to start happening. They're predicting a lot of it's going to start happening this year, especially with climate change. You can have all the seeds you want, but if you don't have the right seeds for the right climates, you're screwed. It's not going to do you one bit of good in the world. Over on Patreon, I have like I told you earlier, I have like 4 or 5 videos coming up that deals with food security, what's going to be going on, how we're going to be dealing with it, the pros and cons and lots of aspects of food security. Guys, I don't know what else I can say. Get the knowledge, because knowledge is power. Those who have the knowledge and the means to get assets to go with it are the ones that will survive the upcoming events that we're going to face in the future. This is not a scare video. This is a video about gaining knowledge. It is not my desire to freak anybody out. It's my desire to push you a little bit if I have to gain knowledge and to maybe give you some knowledge. I don't give out lots of different kinds of knowledges because depending on where you live at, my knowledge may not work for where you're at because different climates and different locations require different knowledges. Some people live up north, they have ash trees, they have birch trees and butternuts and all that kind of stuff, and the red maples and the sugar maples and all these kind of trees, and each one of them, hickories and white oaks and stuff like that, all these trees have a specific use in that area. Every one of them have a medicinal use, every one of them has a use, a culinary use that you can use to survive off of. Guys, learn the things where you're at. Don't sit back and just say, well, I have books. Implement it now. Get out, get in the woods, get on your property, learn what you have, learn it to its capacity, and guys, store up the knowledge in your head. Take yourself out every day without the book and say, can I do it without the book? And look at things and see if you can identify them and pick them and put them in a basket, bring them back to the house, and check them against the book to see how well you did. So guys, once you have gathered everything and you have it in the basket and you've checked your knowledge against the things that you've gathered, see how well you've done and learn. Get the knowledge, because one day it may save your life and your family's life. So guys, I got enough time involved in this one. I got to go start making videos for Patreon. I got several I got to make over there and get them scheduled out. So I am so glad that you all have took time out of your day to sit here with me on Porch Time and us to have this chat. I pray it was educational for you, and I hope and pray that in the future we're able to keep doing Porch Time and we're not pulled down for any reason. And guys, if you want to know a little bit more in-depth knowledge on things, then I'm going to be talking about that on Patreon, where I have a little more freedom of speech. And I don't know how long that platform is going to last, because I'm pretty sure at some point it's going to get hit. So anyway, thank y'all for watching today, and thank you for being a part of Porch Time, and thank you for being a part of Deep South Homestead. We love each and every one of you, and have a blessed day. Thank you from Deep South Homestead.